Hello and welcome to CRF's podcast, Deep Focus. I'm Neha Khanna. In this episode, we're going to examine the United States under Donald Trump and the rupture of the rules based world order as we know it. To discuss this dangerous trend and put it into perspective for us, we're joined on the podcast today by Ambassador Meera Shankar. She's former Indian ambassador to the United States. We also have with us Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. He's the founder and chairperson of the Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies and editor of India Quarterly. A very warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you both. Ambassador Meera Shankar, if I could begin with you. Now, we've seen some very powerful speeches being made at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The speech, particularly made by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, is going viral. And amongst other things, he said this: "Let me be direct. We're in the midst of a rupture, not a transition." Now, the United States has largely been at the helm of building and maintaining the post-World War II rules-based order. But look what's happening now. From the tariff wars that Trump has unleashed to his military interventions abroad, in Venezuela, for instance, or the constant threats to Greenland. You know, all of these events seem to signal a shift towards power politics, unilateralism, interventionism, and what many are now terming American neo-imperialism. Is the second Trump administration, in your view, dismantling the international rules-based order as we know it, brick by brick?
I would say yes, because, um, you know, Trump has weaponized trade, particularly tariffs and access to the American economy. This has triggered weaponization in return by countries like China. He has given a go to the MFN principle, the most favored nation principle, which was the underlying foundation for all trade agreements, including GATT and then its successor, the WTO. So the WTO is virtually now in shambles because you're having different agreements between different countries, and then everybody is pursuing nationalistic foreign policies, nationalistic economic policies. It's more or less like it is that the powerful will do whatever they want. Thucydides, as Kami quotes in his speech, the powerful do what they want and the weak endure what they must. So the world is basically becoming like that. It's not that the rules-based order was perfect. There were always gaps, and US supposed altruism quite often was a cover for the pursuit of US interests. But still, it was a tribute that was paid to the rules-based order, because the hypocrisy of appearing virtuous was certainly part of the vocabulary of the United States. They never really went in just in the pursuit of, pure power. It was to have a more democratic government. It was because there was about to be an ethnic war in the country, so it was preventive intervention and so on. But today we are seeing even that kind of, what could I call it? Window washing, not at all there. I mean, the US is just saying this is in our interest. We want to take Greenland because it's necessary for our security. Good.
Absolutely. In fact, the Canadian Prime Minister has also said that we always knew the rules-based order was part fiction. Now it's almost as if that charade is also gone. Professor Mahapatra, let me come to you now. I think we need to examine in some detail what happened in Venezuela recently. In 2024, Donald Trump won his re election primarily on an America First plank and his bitter opposition to America's forever wars. And yet, look at what happens once he assumes office in his second term. In brazen violation of the UN Charter and international law, he goes ahead and attacks Venezuela, captures its president. Many have called it a kidnapping of the head of a sovereign state. He then declares that America is going to run Venezuelan oil and the country. And it's not Venezuela alone. Trump has threatened Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, and as we know, he's issuing daily threats to annex Greenland by military force if necessary. And this is a NATO ally that we're talking about. Also, ominously enough, he told the New York Times recently the only limit on my global powers would come from my own morality, my own mind, not from international law. The question is very simple, Professor Mahapatra. Isn't this setting a very dangerous precedent where an all powerful leader says, might is right? I can invade a sovereign nation if I choose to, and nobody can stop me. What does this mean for global norms on sovereignty?
First of all, I'll say that the American history is littered with examples of what Donald Trump did to Venezuela and his predecessors did to some other countries. Manuel Antonio Noriega was the president of Panama. He was in the payroll of CIA, and later when he fell out, the senior George Bush did a similar kind of thing, sent the military, picked him up from Panama, brought him to Florida, tried him in the American court of law, and put him behind the bars. He died in 2017. So in a way, I would say that Donald Trump is doing something so brazenly, and I'm using a very strong word, so seamlessly. But then most of his predecessors did similar kind of thing, relatively more quietly and window dressing the operation. So too much focus is being given on what Donald Trump is doing simply because of the scale and the timing and the space that he has been doing all kinds of things. Now, in case of Venezuela, it's not an example of regime change. Now, the team set up by Maduro is still in power. Donald Trump, when he promised America first, all these examples that we gave about threatening Colombia and Mexico, at one time he said Canada is 51st state of the United States, and now he's putting up a map on his Truth Social and saying that he's telling his own people back home that this is America first. Nobody else, America first. And America will do whatever is good for America. The real problem lies in this. It is not America first, it is Donald Trump first. In terms of doing business with other countries, he's an arrogant man. He's not just mercurial, he's too much more than mercurial. And he's very proud and very happy to do whatever he's doing. He's behaving like an emperor, and nobody can question him. Anybody who questions him at home or abroad, there'll be retribution. Now, a person who is taking such strong step against his own people, like, for example, the chairman of the Fed, and who is initiating criminal investigation into governor of Minnesota, what else can we expect from him when he talks about smaller countries outside?
Or unleashing the military on his own citizens?
Yeah. But even then, I would say, there is a Xi Jinping in China. He liberated the rare earth. And Donald Trump came down from 145% of tariff to 45%. Here is another person called Vladimir Putin. Now, Donald Trump claimed that in 24 hours I'll end the Ukraine war. It is 1 year plus. He's not able to. He has met Putin, summit meeting, and he has been trying to persuade him, cajole him, pressurize him. But Ukraine war is going on. Even when you talked about Davos, and we are talking right now discussing this, the kind of attack that the Ukrainians are facing right now, even the parliament of Ukraine is out of power. 60% of the people don't have access to power, right? The war is going on. So what is the real capability of Donald Trump? He claims that he ended India-Pakistan war 70 times over. A country like India is able to say, sorry, sir, you played no role at all, right? So I think Donald Trump is doing a lot of things which appears to be breaking the rule, but then breaking the rule by major powers, full of examples in history.
Yes. You're quite right. This is certainly not the first time that we're witnessing the United States of America engage in such conduct. It won't be the last. You said he's behaving like an emperor. I think many are beginning to call him a mad king. Maybe nobody wanted to call him out up until now, but going by some of the very powerful speeches that have been made at the World Economic Forum in Davos, you would think that perhaps some European leaders have decided it's time to tell the emperor that he has no clothes. Ambassador Meera Shankar, let me come back to you. European nations now finally seem to be pushing back. Let's say, for starters, against the 10% tariff that Donald Trump has introduced for countries who are opposed to the US takeover of Greenland. We've heard some of the speeches, whether by Mark Carney or Emmanuel Macron, even references to bullying. Some countries are now sending troops to Denmark to safeguard Greenland against a possible US invasion. The Danish Prime Minister has said if there is an American attack on Greenland, it will be the end of NATO. I want to ask you two questions. One, do you agree with that it will be the end of NATO if such a thing were to happen? Two, what cascading effect is it likely to happen? Is it likely to have? If today the United States attacks Venezuela and Greenland, what is to stop China from invading Taiwan? Does this not offer Putin justification for his ongoing war against Ukraine? How do you think countries like Russia and China are viewing these events, and especially considering the fact that we're talking about a NATO ally, no less here?
Look, Donald Trump has turned traditional Republican Party positions on their head. The Republican Party used to be the party of free trade. It favored the migration of talented individuals to the United States. So both with regard to immigration, illegal and illegal, and with regard to trade, Donald Trump has turned traditional Republican positions on their head. But where there's the biggest departure is with regard to allies and partners. So he has focused his choicest tariffs on India, which was a strategic partner of the United States, which faces 50% tariff. And the Europeans were quite glad because they saw it as pressurizing India's purchase of Russian oil. But this is the issue, that if you actually welcome selective action against any country, be careful what you wish for, because it may come back to bite you. And we are seeing that now. So this is where you're seeing the biggest departure. The US position used to be quite clear vis-a-vis its adversaries. These are our adversaries. These are our allies. These are strategic partners.
It's hard to tell them apart now.
Now, I think his choicest action is reserved for strategic partners like India, because he's had to walk back on China, since China was prepared and weaponized its dominance of critical minerals and rare earths. So using the supply chain squeeze as a pressure point on the US, and Donald Trump had to take back his tariffs. Having, kind of worked up his MAGA constituency, that he's going to target China much more ferociously this time, then being forced to walk back. He then picked on India, which was the other large country visible in the United States because of the service sector and the IT sector, but not in a position to exert the kind of strategic leverage vis-a-vis the United States that China was able to do. And then 25% tariffs were followed by 25% additional tariffs. Now, of course, with regard to NATO, first there was the question of how is he going to pursue a peace deal with Russia? Will it be at the expense of Ukraine and NATO fully? but that is still in a gray zone right now. On the other hand, on the tariff issue, he began by being a little more accommodating to Europe. 10% tariffs on UK, 15% on the rest of Europe, except in sectors where he has imposed higher tariffs globally, like steel and aluminium or auto components and so on. Now, of course, because of Greenland, which he now wants and says it's essential for US security, that he is now threatening that he has imposed 10% tariff, additional tariff on those countries in Europe which are opposed to US military intervention in Greenland. And then he threatens that if this is not resolved, this will later on rise to 25% tariff. So something which was unprecedented for Europe, because it means that whatever bilateral deals they struck with Trump on tariffs don't hold, yes, because they can be reopened at any time for anything. It's not strictly trade related. It has nothing to do with the balance of trade between Europe and the US. Now this is a strategic pursuit of the United States, and they will use tariffs to support it. Yes. So actually it reopens everything. Everything becomes fluid. And I do agree with the Prime Minister of Denmark that if there is a US move on Greenland without reaching some understanding with Europe, then that will be the end of NATO. NATO will not survive a unilateral US move with regard to territory which belongs to a European country and which the US will then seek to appropriate for itself.
So the stakes really could not be higher for Europe, which is why I think you're now beginning to see some pretty strong reactions. And I think we might have to agree with those critics who say that any deal struck with Donald Trump is not worth the paper it's written on, because the goalposts can shift anytime. So Professor Mahapatra, let's focus on the tariff wars that Donald Trump has unleashed, which Ambassador Shankar just referred to. The man comes into office, starts by imposing varying degrees of tariffs on every US trading partner. He then slaps 25% reciprocal tariffs on India, follows it up with 25% punitive tariffs on India as punishment for buying Russian oil. Then he introduces 25% tariffs on countries doing business with Iran, which means India, already the most tariffed country in the world, is possibly staring at 75% tariffs. He greenlights the Russia sanctions bill, which could mean 500% tariffs on countries that continue to do business with Russia. And as has been pointed out, he recently introduces a 10% tariff on European countries opposing US takeover of Greenland. The question is simply this: isn't this the worst form of coercive economic diplomacy that we have seen in living memory? Donald Trump is weaponizing trade and tariffs with his my way or the highway approach. In the process, is he also not upending the international economic order as we know it and making multilateral organizations such as the WTO irrelevant?
WTO was increasingly becoming irrelevant before Donald Trump came to power. And whatever Donald Trump is doing right now, with the weaponizing tariff, it is a clear indication how the rest of the world dependent on the US market. And one of the reasons why no country in the world could really confront Donald Trump when he weaponized tariff, literally every country wanted to talk to him, negotiate and bring it down, whether it is Vietnam or China or South Korea or Japan or European Union, we just name it, or Mexico or Canada. Now, Donald Trump somehow is using tariff as a weapon not just on economic ground, but political and security ground. Initially, he imposed tariff on Canada. Why? Because lot many immigrants who could be terrorists are coming through the border. Then why? Because fentanyl is being smuggled into USA from Mexico. That is where tariff. Right. Now he's saying that if Macron would not join his proposal of this border peace, 200% on wine. Just imagine. Right. So he's convinced that tariff is the right kind of instrument, which is going to tell the world that this is a unipolar world, like it or not. Your prosperity depends on the United States. And other countries are falling in line to negotiate somehow and bring it down. Now, he's misunderstanding one thing. He's not aware that the repercussion could be disastrous. It's just a matter of time. It's not going to show up. Donald Trump is very confident because, as expected, the US economy is not going down yet. Now, although there are some people who are feeling the pinch of the grocery prices going up, Donald Trump, again, a great liar on television, he would say, no, nothing is happening. Everybody is happy. So what is right, what is wrong, nobody knows. The real problem is he is silencing the critics within the USA. He's filing cases against even the media fellows. Even the Democratic Party leaders are really scared, right? So there is a reign of fear within the USA and outside the USA, and he's taking advantage of that. But otherwise, one has to wait and see how it is going to create a lot of problem for the United States as well. The recent study says that for every $1 of tariff, 90% plus is spent by the American taxpayers, directly or indirectly. So ultimately, it is going to hit them very hard, right? And number two, other countries are not united. If the European Union, China, India, South Korea, Japan all would come together and say, look, World Trade Organization may be increasingly becoming irrelevant. There are many countries violating the rules of the game, including the United States. Why not have some kind of understanding among us and put pressure on Trump? Nobody dares to combine even their strength to negotiate with Trump. So he's taking advantage of the fact that the United States has tremendous amount of military edge over economic partners and economic edge over military rivals like Russia. And he's playing in this troubled water. Otherwise, his policy would not prolong. I'm sure in the near future something is going to show up, and he will tame his own policy. And he's such a clever man that he can always walk back. Oh, Indian economy is a dead economy. If it's a dead economy, what are you gaining by imposing 50% of tariff? How much things you're buying from India anyway? If Donald Trump would raise just $1 tariff on Chinese goods, imagine the amount of money in absolute terms that he would gain, his Treasury Department would gain. But he's pinpointing small countries and arm twisting them, pressurizing them, bulldozing them. This doesn't behold good of the President of the United States of America, but he doesn't care.
He doesn't care, and frankly, he may be the president of the United States of America, but many see him as a schoolyard bully. That really is the way he is dealing with the entire world. Ambassador Shankar, we've also seen a massive US retreat from multilateralism in recent days, with the US quitting as many as 66 international organizations, including the UN Convention on Climate Change and the India-led International Solar Alliance. So in recent days, we've also seen a big US retreat from multilateralism. The US has quit 66 organizations, including the UN Convention on Climate Change and the India-led International Solar Alliance. It's also quit many other international bodies like the Human Rights Council, cut funding to the WHO, even imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court. What long-term strategic implications is this likely to have? Is the US, in a sense, ceding rule-making power to countries like China and Russia?
Yes, I think it also weakens the whole international framework within which countries have operated. He has, as you said, walked out of the climate change accord in Paris, but also 66 allied agreements and understandings, walked out of the WHO, UNCTAD, UNICEF, Human Rights Council and cut funding to the UN itself quite dramatically. So other countries will fill that bill. And he who pays the piper calls the tune. So if the US actually retreats from the UN system and the international system, then other countries will assume greater salience. You've seen that already with regard to developing countries where China's, Belt and Road Initiative, with its easy funding, has become a major vehicle for developing country assistance beyond the international system. So once the World Bank and IMF and bilateral funding from Western countries was squeezed and also became very restrictive with many conditionalities, China's Belt and Road Initiative stepped in to fill that vacuum. And in Africa, in other areas, you see Chinese projects on an extensive scale, quite often to the point where the receiving country has become highly indebted because they haven't looked at, commercial viability of the project and so on. So you will see that. And you will also see that other countries will hedge against this kind of unilateralism, maybe not as a unified group, but certainly in the individual actions they take. For instance, Canada has reached a trade agreement with China. Europe is also signaling a much greater willingness to accommodate China. For instance, today you had the news that the UK is allowing the Chinese embassy to be built in London on a scale which it was opposing in the past, and so on.
Macron has said that we need more Chinese investment in Europe.
Yes. India, Europe is pursuing a trade agreement with India.
And Ursula von der Leyen has described it as the mother of all deals.
Yes. India will also look at other trading partners. We've a deal with the UK, which is being implemented, one with New Zealand and Oman, and hopefully the EU deal gets done in January. So other countries are not going to sit idly by.
Yes.
They will protect their interest. What you will see is, unfortunately, this effort by every country to pursue its own strategic autonomy, where the kind of cooperation for global good, if you will, can also be impacted. So this is where a number of countries have been proposing that middle powers need to step in, to save the rules-based order to the extent they can.
It is possible.
And also to cooperate in areas where they can, like climate change or, other areas.
Yes.
So this is something which needs to be pursued. For India, I think the forums where we will pursue what we can will be, of course, the various bilateral free trade agreements that we are pursuing.
Yeah.
But also, I think BRICS.
Yes, I was going to come.
What can we do there? And, other regional groupings or developing country groupings of which we are a part, to make sure that in this whole process, as they say, when elephants fight, it's the ants which get squeezed.
Yes.
So I think to give voice to the global south and make sure that somewhere they actually still will be able to get their concerns articulated and put in the systems.
So let me put this question to Professor Mahapatra. Professor Mahapatra, amidst all the tumult that Trump has unleashed on the world, The US has assumed the G20 presidency this year while it's threatening to boycott South Africa. India has assumed the BRICS presidency. We know BRICS is anathema to Donald Trump. He sees it as an anti America entity and as a threat to the dollar dominance. How do you see these dynamics playing out this year in the midst of all this turbulence?
Let me first say that Trump withdrawing from 60 plus international organizations has given a death blow to the very concept of multilateralism. Donald Trump believes in bilateralism. He's not comfortable working in a team spirit with other countries. The way he behaved when there was a G7 meeting in Canada, he just went there, spoke, and went back. The way he behaved when he went to South Korea for this APEC summit, he went, struck one or two deals, then he went back. Right. So Donald Trump actually is not comfortable with G7 or G20 or any other multilateral organization, including the United Nations organization. But I must emphasize that this is not something done whimsically. The Donald Trump team, which is really big, they worked on it for about 3-4 months and did thorough research. Which are the international organizations which are helping promote American interests and which are not? If those things are not going to help us in any way, financially or otherwise, we should walk out of all those organizations, and he did that. But then we have to think whether there can be a world order minus USA. Now, any kind of multilateralism will certainly succeed, and only when you have a superpower like the United States, the richest country and the most powerful country, in it. But then it depends on the rest of the world to think about a world order minus the United States. If the US would like to walk alone, let them walk alone. But this idea must get into the head. And as we are seeing right now, the European countries, see here also a lot of double standard. When Maduro was picked up and taken, how many European countries really criticized? Now, the moment he talks about Greenland, they are worried about it. And Donald Trump, even Greenland also, he's not just making remarks just like that. He's saying that it was part of a colony, right? Now, Americans, first of all, they believe in real estate. They bought land from France, Louisiana Purchase. They bought land from even Russia, Alaska. Now, he's looking at Greenland as a real estate. Now, what is interesting is even Russia is supporting Donald Trump on this, saying that even Greenlanders, they don't want to be with Denmark, right? So it's a very big blow to the concept of multilateralism and the multilateral institutions which are existing, either small groupings or larger groupings. All these leaders would have to put their mind together and say that, look, we are not going to allow one gentleman occupying the Oval Office in the White House to dismantle the entire global structure and global order. But then it takes time. By the time all these countries will really tighten the belt, pull out the socks and do something about it, Trump's term will come to an end. Let us hope. Let's hope that whoever succeeds him, either a Republican or a Democrat, will think in a different way. Now, when Donald Trump did a lot of things and Joe Biden did not like his successor did not like it, he undid. And when Donald Trump comes again to power, he undid a lot of things that Joe Biden did. So what is the guarantee that next president will also not do and, reverse the policy of Donald Trump? There is a possibility.
Yes, the trouble is we have 3 more years of Donald Trump and he's already inflicted so much damage on the world in just his first year in office. One shudders to think what more is coming our way in the next 3 years. But, taking off from what Professor Mahapatra said, Ambassador Shankar, let me ask you this question. Is the rules-based world order truly collapsing or dying, or is it just transforming into something more multipolar? There are some who argue that it is not a breakdown, it's a transition to competing blocks and spheres of influence. Can emerging powers like China, India, and regional groupings fill the gap, what would a new global order look like, according to you?
It's very difficult to say right now because it's going to depend on what happens within the US itself. It's going to also depend on the inter-se relationships between the great powers and how they evolve. If you look at US Russia, Trump has talked of a reset of relations with Russia and that the Ukraine war need never have happened. If there is a peace deal on Ukraine and there is a reset of US Russia relations, you have one trajectory. If there is no peace deal and the war continues and the US Russia relationship continues to be uneasy, you have another trajectory. Same with regard to US China. If they actually move towards accommodation, as Trump has been hinting off and on, you have one trajectory. If the confrontation sharpens, there's another trajectory. And there's a third trajectory that you have both confrontation and cooperation, which is really what the relationship between China and the US is going to be. So it's a fairly complex universe at the moment. The other great powers, whether it is China or Russia or Europe, at least China and Russia pay some kind of tribute to the international system. Russia has, of course, violated it in Ukraine, but they still keep talking about the international system and, working within that system, while at the same time ensuring that the US unipolar moment does not get prolonged by creating alternative balancing mechanisms. And then Europe, that basically goes along with the US violation of the rule of law, but obviously becomes very vocal when it comes to a violation by Russia. Yes. So, we've seen some those double standards are in very, but still, I would say that broadly speaking, the three other centers of great power influence, whether it is China or Russia or Europe, would like to see the international system survive. I don't think China may like to replace the US, but it doesn't want a breakdown of the international system. And nor does Russia, nor does Europe. The US seems to be quite comfortable going completely outside the system, like this whole Gaza, peace council. It's completely outside the UN. The UN had a resolution for the peace council, and it had a duration and everything. The right process would have been, for the UN to actually prepare a kind of roster for who could be on the council.
Yes.
But Trump has decided that he will be president for life of that council.
Yes.
And then
He's perhaps hoping it will replace the United Nations, and of course expects countries to pay.
No,
it's very
non to have a mandate beyond Gaza.
Yes.
And it will look at other conflicts as well.
Yes.
Because as of now, if, and Donald Trump himself has said, why are these elections? Why should we hold these elections? Because he say the Republicans could lose. And if they lose, then he will be impeached. This is what he has said that. But clearly, if the Democrats take the House, which they are at the moment poised to, the Senate is a question mark. It looks like the Republicans might keep it. So I'm not taking the worst case scenario for Trump, which is that the
It
Democrats.
runs its legislative abilities and powers, but fact of the matter is that in a lot of decisions he's taken off late, he's bypassed Congress.
No, the thing is that, you see, look what it will do. If the Republicans lose badly in the midterms, they will begin to question Trump's authority in a much greater, to a much greater degree than they have been willing to do till now. Other organs of the US government, which as a part of collective checks and balances have been, kind of moderated, or there's
They've been rather has oriented. There was really a time for Congress to wake up. I think it was required in Venezuela was attacked.
it's not exactly what the authority of the Democrats will be. They will have a blocking authority, certainly. But it will be also what kind of, criticism and opposition to Trump it triggers
Yes.
in existing institutions, including the Republican Party, which can then begin to have an impact on Trump's.
As we wrap up this conversation, Professor Mahapatra, I'll give you the last word. In the midst of this rupture of the international rules-based order that we are witnessing, and the tensions and the uncertainties that are haunting India-US ties, which many argue are at their lowest ebb in 3 decades, how do you think India can navigate these turbulent waters and at the same time combat Trump's unilateralism? What role can India play globally in this time of geopolitical and geo-economic turbulence?
India is already playing its part in a very subtle way. Number one, let me first assert a few positions on your previous questions about the world order. One important thing is de-dollarization. De-dollarization is not a phenomenon which began after Trump came to power. It has been going on for quite some time. Today in the international market, most of the countries are buying gold and silver and not keeping their dollar as the asset, foreign asset. Number two, BRICS is already having something called BRICS Pay, and now India is going to float a digital currency for BRICS during its presidency here in India. Number three, the European countries, they have about $8 trillion of American asset in Europe. Now they're saying that if necessary, we must start selling it. What will happen to dollar? Simply because Donald Trump made a statement that I'll take Greenland by hook or by crook. Then immediately the international market responded and the dollar lost its value in the international basket of currency. By saying this, I'm just hinting that many countries around the world are already taking certain steps to reduce the dependence on the United States. And they're going to hedge in the future. So the process has already started, and the international order is not going to collapse simply because of Donald Trump. He's trying his best, but there is going to be resistance in very many ways, maybe subtle way of managing Donald Trump's policies to protect the interest of all these countries in different ways and all. What can India do? I think the first thing that Indian government is doing is not openly confronting Donald Trump and quarreling with him, because he doesn't appear to be a rational leader of the most powerful country in the world who can listen to others. He doesn't listen to anybody else. That doesn't mean that not confronting him orally means just sitting quietly. The way India has been able to manage its economy despite the tariff, 50% tariff, the way India has been able to manage, Pakistan going closer towards the United States, the way India has maintained the line of communication open with China, the way India has navigated through buying Russian oil, despite all the kind of pressures, these are all indications that India is playing its own role. India is not a superpower. India is a global player. And although Donald Trump is anti-science and he's against even the whole climate change policies, India is the leader, one of the leaders of the International Solar Alliance. So simply because Trump is going to drill, baby, drill, and more coal and more oil, Other countries are not going to follow him anyway, because if there's global warming, it's going to affect every country, including Donald Trump's country, right? So, in these turbulent waters, the best thing is to watch and take slow but steady steps to ensure that in the future, no country in the world, powerful country in the world, should be able to disrupt international order to an extent everybody else is going to suffer from it. Now, who can restrain Donald Trump? He's uncontrolled within the United States. We're talking about, this election. Now, I'm not very hopeful that if the Democrats are going to win, even the House of Representatives, they are going to do a lot of things to restrain this president. He doesn't care. He doesn't listen to Congress at all. He has taken so many steps violating the American law, and he has and he has packed the courts with his own supporters, and whatever he does, they support. So, in this ifs and buts, if there is a possibility of Supreme Court of the United States giving a verdict that tariff is illegal, it will have its own impact on the US, on Donald Trump, and on the world order. Right. This is one. Number two is after the 2026, this November election, if it is a massive mandate for Democratic Party, then of course something will sink into Donald Trump's head that people are becoming very, restive with his administration. He has to change ways. He's smart enough to undo whatever he said and undo whatever he did and try to manage and complete his term. So these are the constraints that only the American people, American system can bring on him. At the moment, he doesn't care about checks and balances. He doesn't care about separation of powers. And the real danger is this: he has dismantled so many institutions, and he has packed the bureaucracy with his own supporters.
Yes.
And there is a fear that even after Trump, Trumpism may continue.
Yes, especially if you have somebody like a J.D. Vance from you in 2020.
Yeah. So, but again, my message would be not to worry too much. Things are going to happen the way it's happening, but then right kind of steps are being taken by multiple countries, including China and Russia. There's not going to be a Sino-American Cold War for the simple reason that economic interdependence is too much. Russia doesn't have the economic wherewithal to really start a Cold War of the kind they fought during the Cold War. So the European Union are now worried about NATO getting dismantled. I'm not going to shed tears if NATO disintegrates. Because if all the military alliances collapsed, including Warsaw Pact Organization, NATO continued. Why should it continue?
Yes.
Right. So I think things are going to settle down.
All right. It's hard to be a little optimistic with Donald Trump in the White House. These are certainly turbulent times. We'll have to wait and see what happens next, especially with regard to Greenland. A lot of speculation, a lot of growing fear and tensions in Europe. Are we going to witness a rupture of the world order? Or is it a mere transition? I guess the jury on that is still out. But it's been a pleasure talking to both of you, Ambassador Meera Shankar and Professor Mahapatra. Thank you so much for joining me on Deep Focus.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Ambassador Meera Shankar and Professor Chintamani Mahapatra about the United States under Donald Trump and the rupture of the international rules-based order as we know it. Do remember to like, share, and subscribe to CRF's YouTube channel and look out for the next episode of our podcast, Deep Focus.